Hi, I'm Lou from Dividends Dog. Welcome. So here we talk about stocks, especially dividends paying stocks. So if that's your kind of thing, please like and consider subscribing. Usually what we do is we analyze one stock to review at a time. But my last video, what I did was called The Truth About the Bank Crisis 2023. I tried analyzing the bank as a sector. So basically the whole bank sector is one sector. So during that video, I briefly mentioned that there are only a few banks, maybe like 3 or 4 or 5, that are so big and important that the governments basically won't let them fail, that they could literally topple the whole economy if they went bust. So since then, I've been researching this a lot, and I was surprised by a few things here that I found out that I want to share with you all. The first thing, I was surprised that there is an actual list of banks that are too big to fail. Like this is an actual official list. It's put together by the Financial Stability Board. It's an international body that includes all of the G20 economies. It's called by this bland name of List of Global Systemically Important Banks. That's what they choose to call it. Everybody else just calls it too big to fail. See, I thought this was kind of open to debate here. And that's what brought me learning more about this. You know, I had these questions like, well, what about some of these other very big banks? We know sort of the money center banks would be there, but, among the regional banks, some of them are quite large, like very, very large, like PNC or US Bancorp. Regional banks, yes, but they're so big, might they make the cut to be on this list? So that's what started me looking at this more. So first surprise was that there is an actual official list. Second surprise was that there are actually 30 such banks on this list. Now, granted, this is a global list, but still, even though it's global, 30 banks was much more than I thought. I thought just a handful. So it's important to note here that 30 banks on this list are not like just all the same. It's not just a list with all of them the same. They categorize them into buckets. That's their term. The higher the tier, or bucket as they call it, the more of a capital cushion they need. So we can kind of infer here that the higher the bucket, the more important, I guess for lack of a better term for it, the more important the bank, or maybe a better way to say it, the more vital the bank is to the economy. And this is all, to say that this does not mean that you can't, this doesn't mean that you can't lose money investing in these banks. Just look at what happened back in the bank crisis of 2008. I remember banks back then, like Citigroup, like what happened to their shareholders. I can remember Bank of America started to look awful wobbly. Their share price got hammered so much it was down to the single digits. So, these are not, even though they're all 30 of these banks are too big to fail, doesn't necessarily mean it's safe to invest in them. All right, so let's get right to it here. So here's the list. It's alphabetical within a given bucket. So it's important to note here that the banks, that the buckets can and do change from year to year. This is the most recent as of today's list. They do this every year in November. So this is for 2022. So there's nothing in bucket 5, that's empty. And there's only one single bank in bucket 4, that's JP Morgan Chase. The next rung or next bucket, there's 3 banks in bucket 3. Two are American banks, Bank of America and Citigroup. And then we have HSBC, that's the Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. That's a British bank. Bucket Bucket 2 has 7 banks. So there's an American one, it's Goldman Sachs. And then there are 2 Chinese banks, Bank of China, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Barclays is a British bank. BNP Paribas is a French bank. Deutsche Bank is German. Mitsubishi UFJ FG is Japanese. And then we have bucket 1. This is the lowest bucket. And it has the most banks at 19 banks in this bucket. So this bucket 1 is actually the majority of the banks out there. So 4 of them are American. The Bank of New York Mellon, Morgan Stanley, State Street, Wells Fargo. 3 are French, Group BPCE, Group Credit Agricole, and Societe Generale. Those are French. 2 of them are Chinese, Agricultural Bank of China and China Construction Bank. 2 are Swiss, Credit Suisse and UBS. 2 are Canadian, the Royal Bank of Canada and Toronto Dominion. 2 are Japanese, Mizuho FG, Sumitomo Mitsui FG. 1 is Dutch, ING. 1 is Spanish, Santander. 1 is British, Standard Chartered. 1 is Italian, UniCredit. So more than I would have thought, even amongst the U.S. banks. You know, my prior video, I had guessed that J.P. Morgan Chase would be there. I didn't realize that would be like their number one, you know, the number 1 bucket, but it's there as a number 1. It's J.P. Morgan Chase is the biggest of banks in the United States. Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo. So those I had figured were going to be there. Goldman Sachs is an investment bank. Both Bank of New York and State Street are primarily custodial banks for stocks. But if you have any questions about if you can lose money on these banks, you know, just look at Credit Suisse. You know, it's basically been a basket case, and it's on life support. You know, as I'm saying this, you know, the Swiss government has come out to try to shore it up, to provide it with money to keep it going. You know, but what if you were a shareholder? You would have lost almost all your money. So this, by the way, goes without saying, this is not financial advice here, but we're just saying what, you know, so if these banks, any of them were to get a bailout, the bank might get the bailout, but you, the investor, you know, owning stock or bonds in these banks, you, the investor, probably would not get the bailout. So I think that's probably the lesson here, is don't assume that you're safe investing in any of these banks just because they're too big to fail. You know, they're too big to fail. The governments will probably step in to save them. But, you know, we have a good test runs here. Looking back at, you know, in America, we can see what happened in 2008, 2009, when what happened to Bank of America, Citigroup, and other banks. And now, as we're talking about this, you know, we just look at something like Credit Suisse, and, you know, you can buy stock in it and everything, and bonds in it, and you know, yeah, they might be too big to fail, but you as an investor, you can fail. You can basically lose all your money. So that's the whole upshot of this. I thought it was interesting, and it's interesting to see what's not on these. There were no regional banks, even though some of these regional banks, you know, their market caps might be $50 billion or $80 billion. They're not on the list of too big to fail. So thank you for watching. Please, you know, post your comments, ideas, your opinions about this. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.